Morning news on SuperTalk 99.7 WTN. Want to get right to the Newsmaker Hotline, where Congressman Mark Green is joining us this morning. Congressman, thank you very much for being here on Nashville's Morning News. And I'm so fascinated by this story. It is about the North Pole. It has nothing to do with Santa Claus. It actually has to do with Russia and China and how their sort of allegiance could pose a danger to America. So talk about what's going on right around the North Pole.
Yeah, so Russia continues to push itself and China into U.S. economic zone waters in the Arctic. Last summer, 7 warships came into our economic zone. Biden responded with 1 Coast Guard cutter. This year, they did it with 11 ships, and he responded with 4 destroyers, some P-8 Poseidon aircraft that tracked all of it. A little better showing from the Biden administration. But, you know, the high north, Alaska, is really one of our last lines of defense. All of our missile defense is there. And, of course, the passageways are opening up as the Arctic ice melts. That means a competition between peers for natural resources, fishing rights, things like that. But it also means, more importantly, it means protecting the sovereignty of the nation. And we know, it was made very clear to us when the Chinese spy balloon came from that direction and should have been shot down, before it even got into our 12-mile zone. But they didn't do that. So just pointing out to other members of Congress, much of this committee hearing yesterday was about educating other members of Congress of the delta between Russia, China, and the United States in the high north. For example, Russia has 54 icebreakers. The United States has 2, one of which is broken. So we're not competing in a very strategic and important region, and we just wanted to bring that out in the committee hearing yesterday.
And I know that Iran is sort of involved in this as well. And what's concerning is, of course, what's happening there around the North Pole. But also the issue is that there is this growing allegiance between what I would say is our enemies, Russia and China as well. And so this is something where this particular conversation is about the North Pole. But this extends far beyond that. It's really about the allegiance between Russia and China, which poses a direct threat to America.
Yeah, no doubt. And one of the things that the high north is advantaging that is through, China buying the oil from Russia, sort of defeating our attempts to put pressure on Russia and their invasion of Ukraine. And those shipping routes through the north are where the oil, imagine, a ship's route through the Panama Canal versus just cutting across from Russia to China across the high north. So this is a big deal, and we've got to prepare ourselves for it.
Breaking news this morning, Congressman Mark Green joining us. Breaking news this morning that looks like Dr. Anthony Fauci is going to do some testifying on Capitol Hill. I mean, I know this is a big deal for some folks, and perhaps it is a big deal, but it's not like he hasn't been there, done that before. I mean, would you have any initial thoughts?
Well, he has no credibility in the United States Congress, so it's going to be brutal for him to come before us. It takes a lot of, guts, you can say, to do it, but the guy has no credibility, and he should have been fired a long time ago. I actually won't be in that hearing today. I've got a foreign affairs hearing on border security, so and mostly about root cause migration. But that's going to be some fireworks. If people want to click on C-SPAN and watch that one's going to be good.
So let's talk about what is going on with Israel and Hamas. We just had Senator Bill Hagerty on talking about this as well. Just want to get your take on it for today on this Thursday, November 30th. We see that Hamas has once again this morning broken the ceasefire with this shooting. This is yet another example of Hamas breaking the ceasefire. as we have all of these folks here in America screaming ceasefire, ceasefire, we have a ceasefire that Hamas keeps breaking. And so now, every single day, it seems like we're getting yet another extension of this ceasefire as we get, we have 3 hostages that are being released for 1 prisoner. And so let's talk a little bit about your initial thoughts on the news today that Hamas has once again broken the ceasefire.
This is what I have said just tons of times about our current administration. They don't know a good guy from a bad guy, and they think a deal can be cut with Iran and people like that, right? And Hamas is clearly subhuman. The people who perpetrated the attack on Israel, they need to be destroyed. And this is what you should expect. This is what a reasonable person would expect. Of course, the administration is shocked that they would break the ceasefire. I could have told them before the deal was made they'd break the ceasefire,
yep.
And any reasonable person could. So, at some point you hope these guys will get smart and just recognize you can't cut deals with these kinds of people. We did get some hostages freed, so I think doing it, but not expecting them to break it at some point was just foolhardy.
No, you can't trust terrorists. I mean, and we know that Hamas has lied over and over again. Going to ask you about Alejandro Mayorkas. I know you're shocked about that, but going to ask about him coming up next at 7:45. Time to check the roads from the Paul Winkler Investment WTN Traffic Center.
Antioch Pike North Blue Hole in accident. Blackman Road over at Briarwood. They're still trying to get that wreck out of the way. Back up here at Mount Juliet Hermitage on 40 West into downtown. Some brake tapping going on. Also 40 East, some slow go here at Old Hickory. I'm Jack Womack. Traffic every 10 minutes every morning on SuperTalk 99.7 WTN.
Thank you very much. 7:45, sunny and a high of 63, and right now 38 degrees at SuperTalk 99.7. Congressman Mark Green joining us. Okay, so committee chair on Homeland Security. Let's talk about Alejandro Mayorkas. Every time we turn around, the Republicans are screaming that he needs to be impeached. I know that from your vantage point, this is something that you're not necessarily involved in per se, but you have certainly had a lot of time discussing border security with Alejandro Mayorkas. What are your thoughts?
Well, he needs to go. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The guy's got to go, and I have voted each time that the impeachment privileged motions have come up to impeach him. But there are certain members of our conference that are Republicans that believe that the impeachment was so abused last time that there needs to be a more methodical process. And so for those individuals, I'm doing my 5-phase investigation. I think we'll finish it up at the end of, probably the 3rd week of December and make a recommendation 1st week of January for what's next. And I think that's going to be an impeachment. But the problem is we've got 8 Republicans that just aren't there. My job when I vote on the floor of the House is to represent my district. So Marjorie's preferred motion to actually impeach, I'll vote yes for, right? In my committee, my job is to convince those holdouts that he needs to be impeached. So we're doing that methodical, transcribed, under oath interviews of all these people. Right now we're in the waste, fraud, and abuse phase of that investigation. It's the last phase of the investigation. And what happens there is you interview one guy and it leads to the need to interview 2 or 3 others. And we have to do that work so that when we put our report together and make it to the Judiciary Committee, it is wired tight, and that there are the things there that will convince those holdouts. That's kind of what we're doing right now.
I've got to ask, because I've watched the hearings, I've watched Mayorkas testify. I know what's going on the southern border. Even the liberal media has been talking about what's going on the southern border. These 8 Republicans, I mean, what do they need to see or hear at this point?
It's interesting. It's different for each one. For example, for some, it's due process. So they want to know that we've done due process and we haven't bastardized the process. And, so they want to see the investigation completed, and then they're probably going to vote. Some of them are such purists on the words high crime and misdemeanor that they want to see true elements of a crime. So one of the things we're looking at is aiding and abetting the drug cartels. Well, aiding and abetting the drug cartels at the federal level, the criminal elements of the crime requires intent for the outcome. So if you charge aiding and abetting for trafficking, you have to show that his intent was to have drugs trafficked in the United States. I think we can do that, but we have to show a lot of work in order to support that. And so that's the process we're going through to convince the remaining folks.